Howdy, Shasta College Humanities 2. It is Tuesday, the 25th. 2 more days and the semester is over. I thought we'd end of the week. We don't. So we're going to cram a lot of work into this week. Please hand in all your submissions by this Thursday, midnight. Your journal, whatever essays are left. I'm not going to sign any more essays, but we're going to do a quiz, and I'm going to put that on the board today. And that's what I want to talk about right now, the quiz. If you look at my lecture yesterday and you look at my announcements in modules, there is a documentary you need to watch called Easy Rider, Raging Bulls. You need to watch the whole thing. We're jumping way into the mid-century cinema. I couldn't do the deep dive into cinema that I wanted to. We don't have time because time is running out. Thursday's our last day. So that documentary covers a time in cinema, Hollywood cinema, I should say, that was probably the last great golden era of meaningful cinema, not money-making cinema, not box office extravaganzas like we have now, not superheroes, no superheroes in sight in these things. They were social realism, and that started essentially with the movies Bonnie and Clyde and The Graduate, but that documentary starts with the movie Easy Rider. It covers Bonnie and Clyde also. You need to know that back history of why and how cinemas started changing, what happened, and this is what you have to pay attention to in the documentary. I'm going to ask you 3 questions, and I'm going to give you the answers right now, but you have to listen to me. If you don't hear this, you won't get what you need to know. What was going on in the culture during the 60s? A lot. We had recently the president of the United States assassinated, and we had a war that was very unpopular in Vietnam. We had campus unrest because there was a draft, and male students could get drafted, and so there's campus protests. There was civil rights movement where African Americans were trying to get their equal rights for voting and for not getting lynched. And then there was the women's movement, feminism. Women wanted their rights, they wanted equal pay. Up until the 1970s, women weren't allowed to have their own charge card. They weren't allowed to get a loan at the bank without their husband signing for it. They didn't have a lot of autonomy, and they were on the streets protesting this, trying to get equal pay. There's still not equal pay. A lot of times women in the workplace don't get as much as men, still to this day. So there's a lot of campus unrest, lots of protesting going on, and rock and roll. Movies like Woodstock and Monterey Pop Festival were showing a new generation of young people, hip people who were smoking pot, having what they called free love. Nothing was free, though, not really. Amongst all this campus unrest, a new breed of, pardon my coughing, a new breed of directors who were raised on foreign films, the French New Wave. You don't know what that is, it's all right. It was a series of films that came out in the early 60s in France, 400 Blows, Breathless, that changed cinema. It made it look like you could make a movie, not have big Hollywood production, not having a bunch of money. You can have amateur actors, and go out and make a story in the streets of Paris. And these movies changed cinema history right then and there. This new breed of directors that are going to film school, they never had those before. People like Francis Ford Coppola, who directed The Godfathers and Apocalypse Now, Martin Scorsese, who directed Mean Streets and Raging Bull, and so many more. George Lucas, who went on to direct Star Wars, Steve Spielberg, Jaws, and Indiana Jones. These people Paul Schrader, these people who wrote Taxi Driver and other movies, and is a director also. Uh, they were coming out of film schools, majoring in film, and they were watching foreign films. It was changing the way they looked at things, influencing them, as was the politics of the day, the protests. The youth culture was booming, and there was a lot of unrest, campus unrest, political unrest in the country, and that influenced them also to make strong personal stories that audiences could relate to. Hollywood had lost their touch with the audience. They didn't know how to handle the youth market at all. And they were still making kind of old fuddy duddy movies like Hello, it's in the documentary if you look at it, like Hello Dolly and others, that the young people were staying away. They couldn't relate to it. Um, a brilliant producer by the name of, he's still alive. He's in his 90s now. Roger Corman, understood the youth market better, and he started making movies, low budget horror movies, teen movies like surfer movies that became a big deal in the 60s, horror movies, and biker movies. Hell's Angel movies became a big deal, and his movies like The Wild Angels made a lot of money, made on very little money. Um, he understood the youth culture, and who were the kids were going to the movies at the drive-in. We don't have drive-ins anymore, but at one time there was over 5,000 drive-ins around the country, and it was a good place to park your car, have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, whatever, and maybe smoke a joint, drink uh, some cheap wine, maybe have some sex in the back seat, and watch a movie. And he understood that. And so he started making these movies for this youth market that Hollywood had no idea how to tap into. These new directors were by guys like Roger Corman to maybe a movie, maybe write a movie. Um, and so people like Mark Scorsese and Peter Bogdanovich, who directed a couple classic masterpieces like Last Picture Show, What's Up, Doc, um, got a chance to get behind the camera. Actors who wanted us to get behind the camera, like Peter Fonda and Dennis Hopper, got a chance to get behind the camera. During this time, there was some young hit producers who made a lot of money off a television show called The Monkees. They made a boatload of money off of this franchise, and Bert Schneider and Bob Rafelson, and they went into movies, directing movies. And one of the first movies that they put their money behind was Easy Rider. They gave Dennis Hopper and the boys about 300 grand, which was a lot of money to them, but not very much money compared to Hollywood movies. And they said, go off and make one of these biker movies. Well, beyond their wildest dreams, it was a gigantic hit. It made well over $100 million when movies weren't making anywhere near that kind of money on a $300,000 budget. They became overnight sensations, and the kids, people my age, couldn't see it enough. I saw Easy Rider multiple times, as well as I did all these films that are in this documentary. Um, Bonnie and Clyde, I still watch it to this day once a year. It's a masterpiece of in entertaining, meaningful cinema. They actually had a message to it. And The Graduate's another great one about what you do after you graduate college. It's the predicament we all have to face eventually. And then directors like Robert Altman were doing their work with Nashville and MASH and The Long Goodbye. And guys like Hal Ashby were directing Harold and Maude. It's in the documentary. You need to watch the documentary, folks. Martin Scorsese was doing his thing with these low budget gangster films out of New York. He went on to direct some huge movies, Goodfellas, Raging Bulls. That's what the documentary is called, Easy Rider, Raging Bulls, because it essentially covers that 10-year period between those two movies. Um, and that's when the director, the auteur director, meaning the author of their own work, um, took over the Hollywood mainstream. These weren't independent films filmed outside of Hollywood. That wasn't happening. These were financed by Hollywood studios. Warner Brothers and Paramount and 20th Century were starting to produce these movies, and they made money. Uh, and when the studio makes money, they want to duplicate it. And so they started looking for young auteur directors who came out of film school, who studied the French New Wave, who studied Italian neorealism. You don't need to know this stuff because we don't have time to go over it. But they looked at foreign films because filmmakers like Ingmar Bergman in Sweden was cranking out adult cinema. I don't mean your X-rated cinema. I'm talking about adult themes that are considered art films, and they were shown on campuses throughout the United States, and the college kids were loving it. But they weren't seeing anything in Hollywood that they could relate to. So these new directors got a chance, and the young people really responded first to these horror movies, beach party movies, the biker movies. Then there's Easy Rider, which elevated the biker movie, and they were off and running with that. And then directors like Sam Peckinpah, who came out of another generation, they weren't of this generation, but his sensibilities were anti-Hollywood, directed a movie called The Wild Bunch, which changed the way we think about making westerns to this day, and violence on screen also. Um, these were revolutionary directors, and they got the reins of power because their movies made money, and that was important. And Hollywood started hiring these guys to direct their mainstream movies, and they were making money. Now, in the meantime, this went on for about 10 years. In the meantime, these directors are bringing in one project after another, and they're getting the green light, but some of them wasn't perfect. Some of their movies didn't make the money, and then drugs got involved, cocaine and parties, like Hollywood gets, started destroying the reputation of some of these directors, not all of them, but some of them. And the studios didn't know what to do. And then a little movie came by they called Jaws by Steve Spielberg, and it wasn't a revolutionary film. It was revolutionary in the fact that it made $100 million, the first movie to ever do that in a short amount of time. And that became the story. Not if it's a good movie or not. It's an entertaining movie. Who doesn't like Jaws? But it's not a lot of meaning to it. There's not like a profundity in it. If anything, the author, Peter Benchley, who wrote the book Jaws, regretted it the rest of his life because after that movie came out, people started killing great whites for no reason. And he said, "What have I done? That's not. I didn't want people to go out and kill these things. They're not doing harm to anybody." To this day, people are scared to go into the water because of Jaws. He always regretted that. Wished he could have taken it back, but of course, he made millions of dollars, and he lived pretty good because of it. But it made a lot of money and highly entertaining, and it knocked off a lot of these artistic movies that weren't making that kind of bread. And 2 years after that, George Lucas directed Star Wars. Now, game over for the auteur directors. No longer are the studios looking for artistic art films that make some money back. They're looking for a blockbuster. Star Wars went off the deep charge money wise, need a lot more money than anybody ever seen before. George Lucas is not considered a very good director, but he did well with that one. And you know his name now. He's done all the big Star Wars movies, all of them. Him and Steele Spielberg, they produce a lot of movies together. And and like he says in that documentary, when he's talking to John Milius, the director who had directed Dillinger and Wind and the Lion, two really excellent movies, who came out of that era of the auteur director. He said to John Milius, he goes, "I don't care about directing movies. I care about how much money I'm going to make on the franchise for toys." And the franchise for toys, he had the copyright on that, and he made billions from with lunch boxes, sheets, pajamas. That's what he was concerned about, not so much being a director. Anyway, but he also did really highly successful film. And his first film was a bomb, THX 1138. It's really a decent film, though, sci-fi film. But he did American Graffiti, which was a huge hit, set in the early 60s, rock and roll, and it spawned the TV series Happy Days. Um, so popular because they just front loaded it with cute stories about being a teenager, high school, your graduation night, and with a bunch of music from that era, Rock Around the Clock, and all that music from the 50s. And it was a huge hit. Then he got to do Star Wars, which was even a huger hit. So he was golden from then on. But what it did, it knocked all these other artist films off the charts, and the big studios said, you know what, Star Wars and Jaws are essentially big budgeted um, exploitation films, B movies they called them, meaning they weren't deep with meaning; they're just deep with action and entertainment. And the studios goes, we could duplicate this. We don't need these directors coming in here telling us the movies they want to do. We have no control over them, and so the studios took back control. That essentially ended the era of the auteur director because, and it just wasn't the debauchery and the drug use. There was some of that, absolutely, but the real ending to the era was the studios took back control. This is all going to be in the quiz. Everything I've said today, the answers are in what I just spoke about. So if you stuck to this, you'll know the answer. I'm going to post the quiz in a little bit. You'll see it. You'll have until the end of the semester to finish it, but you're going to need to watch that documentary to be able to answer it. Um, the three questions I'm going to ask: do a brief essay, no more than a paragraph. Talking short stuff, 3 or 4 sentences. You can answer this stuff. What I don't want you to do is answer everything with the 3 words. If I see them, you won't do any good. Do not say sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Had very little to do with any of this. That's a go-to answer about influences and defeats. Sorry, folks, that's not the answer I'm going for. Go deeper. What influenced the directors? What influence did they have in the culture? And how did the era end? It's all there in what I just spoke about. Good luck. We made it. It was a short session. It's not so hot this week. Time to get to work because it's almost over. See you next time down the road.